The dirt beneath Brendan Rourke's boots was hard and cracked, the kind of earth that had forgotten what rain felt like. And as he stood at the edge of his withered field watching another harvest die, he knew that this season would either break him or bury him. His father's farm, the land he had promised to keep thriving, stretched before him in rows of brown and yellow where green should have been. The irrigation ditch that fed his crops had run dry 3 weeks ago, and every attempt to redirect water from the distant creek had failed. His neighbors had already abandoned their holdings, fleeing to the eastern townships where work was steady and hunger was less certain. Brendan had stayed because leaving felt like admitting defeat, like dishonoring the memory of a father who had cleared this land with his own bleeding hands. He wiped sweat from his forehead and squinted at the sun hanging merciless in the pale sky. The plow leaned against the barn wall, mocking him with its uselessness. Without water, there was no point in turning the soil. Without crops, there would be no coin to buy supplies for winter. The mathematics of survival had become brutally simple. That was when he saw her. She emerged from the tree line at the western edge of his property, where the wild forest pressed against cleared land. At first, Brendan thought she might be a deer or some other large animal, but as she came closer, he realized with a jolt of alarm that she was walking upright. She was tall, broad-shouldered, and moving with the cautious gait of someone who expected trouble. When she stepped into full sunlight, he saw the green of her skin, the thick dark hair braided down her back, and the small tusks curving up from her lower jaw. An orc. Brendan's hand moved instinctively toward the axe he kept near the barn. Stories from childhood rushed through his mind, tales of orc raids and human villages burned to ash. But even as his fingers closed around the axe handle, he noticed something that made him pause. She was not armed. No sword hung at her hip, no bow across her shoulder. She wore simple clothes, a rough tunic and trousers that had seen better days, and her hands hung empty at her sides. She stopped about 20 paces away, close enough that he could see her face clearly. She looked young, perhaps not much older than him, with amber eyes that held a mixture of wariness and something else he could not quite name. Desperation, maybe, or exhaustion. "I mean no harm," she said, and her voice surprised him. It was deeper than a human woman's, but clear and steady. "I saw your fields. They are dying." Brendan kept his grip on the axe but did not raise it. "That is not your concern. Perhaps not." She shifted her weight, glancing at the dried stalks of wheat that rustled in the hot breeze. "But I know how to fix an irrigation system. I have done it before." He stared at her, trying to determine if this was some kind of trick. Orcs did not help humans. Everyone knew that. The two races had been enemies for generations, separated by mutual distrust and occasional violence. His own grandfather had been killed in a border skirmish with an orc warband. And yet here stood this orc woman, offering help as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Why would you do that?" Brendan asked. She was quiet for a moment, her gaze dropping to the ground. When she looked up again, there was something raw in her expression. "Because I need food. I need a place to stay, even if only for a little while. I can work for it. You are a long way from orc territory." "Yes." She did not elaborate, but the single word carried weight. Brendan studied her. She was thin beneath the muscle, he realized. Her clothes hung loose in places they should not, and there were dark circles under her eyes. Whatever had brought her here, it had not been easy. He thought about sending her away, about protecting himself from whatever danger she might represent. But he also thought about his dying crops and the long winter ahead. If she truly could fix the irrigation system, if she could help him save even part of the harvest, then perhaps it was worth the risk. "What is your name?" he asked. "Kragga." "I am Brendan." He released the axe, letting it lean back against the barn wall. "If you are lying to me, if this is some scheme, I will defend myself. I understand. The irrigation ditch is over there." He pointed toward the eastern edge of the property. "It has been clogged somewhere upstream. I have tried to clear it, but I cannot find the blockage." Kragga nodded. "Show me." They walked together across the field, maintaining a careful distance from each other. Brendan kept glancing at her, still not quite believing what was happening. She moved with surprising grace for someone so large, her steps quiet despite her size. When they reached the ditch, she crouched down and examined the dry bed, running her fingers through the cracked mud. "How far upstream have you checked?" she asked. "About half a mile. The creek is still flowing, but the water is not reaching the ditch." She stood and began walking along the ditch line, moving upstream with her eyes fixed on the ground. Brendan followed, watching as she paused every few dozen paces to examine something he could not see. They walked for nearly an hour before she stopped abruptly and pointed. "There." Brendan looked but saw nothing unusual, just brush and tangled roots along the bank. Kragga pushed through the undergrowth and began pulling away branches and debris. After a few minutes of work, she revealed a massive beaver dam that had diverted the water into a side channel leading away from his property. "This is your problem," she said. "The beavers built across the main flow. All your water is going south now." Relief and frustration warred in Brendan's chest. "I walked right past this. I should have seen it. It was hidden well." Kragga began tearing at the dam with her bare hands, pulling out branches and packed mud. Her strength was remarkable. Sticks that would have taken Brendan minutes to break, she snapped like kindling. He joined her, working alongside her to dismantle the obstruction. The labor was hard and hot, and by the time they had cleared enough for water to flow freely again, both of them were soaked with sweat and covered in mud. But when the first trickle of water came through, growing quickly into a steady stream that flowed down the ditch toward his fields, Brendan felt something close to joy. "It is working," he said, and he could not keep the smile off his face. Kragga watched the water flow for a moment, then nodded. "Your crops will have a chance now." They walked back to the farmhouse in silence. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. When they reached the barn, Brendan realized he needed to make a decision. He could send her away now, pay her with a meal and be done with it, or he could do something far more dangerous. "There is a loft in the barn," he heard himself say. "It is dry and has clean straw. You can sleep there tonight." Kragga looked at him with surprise. "You would let me stay?" "You fixed my irrigation system. That is worth a bed and meals for a few days at least." He paused. "But there are rules. You stay in the barn, you do not enter my house uninvited, and if anyone comes by, you stay out of sight. Because I am an orc. Because people around here do not trust orcs, they would assume the worst." She nodded slowly. "I can accept those terms. Good." He gestured toward the well. "You can wash up there. I will bring food when it is ready." Brendan went inside and prepared a simple meal of bread, cheese, and dried meat. His hands shook slightly as he worked, the reality of what he had done beginning to sink in. He was harboring an orc on his property. If his neighbors found out, they would think him mad or worse. But as he carried the food out to the barn and found Kragga sitting in the loft, her face and hands clean, her expression grateful, he felt that perhaps he had made the right choice. "Thank you," she said as she accepted the plate. "This is more than I expected. You earned it." He hesitated, then climbed halfway up the ladder so they could talk more easily. "May I ask what brought you here? Why you are alone?" Kragga was quiet for a long moment, chewing slowly. When she finally spoke, her voice was carefully neutral. "I was cast out from my clan. I am what they call clanless now. Why? Because I refused to raid a human settlement. Because I said that killing farmers and burning homes was wrong. She met his eyes. My clan did not agree, so I left before they could force me to participate or kill me for refusing. Brendan absorbed this information. It contradicted everything he had been taught about orcs, about their savage nature and love of violence. Yet here sat a woman who had sacrificed her home and her people for a principle. That took courage, he said, or foolishness. I am not certain which. She set down the empty plate. But I could not do it. I could not hurt people who were only trying to live their lives. They talked for a while longer as darkness fell, their conversation careful and circling around deeper topics. Brendan learned that Kragga had been wandering for weeks, avoiding both orc and human settlements, living off the land and growing increasingly desperate. She learned that he had inherited this farm a year ago when his father died of fever, that he had no siblings and no wife, that he was fighting to keep a promise even as the land seemed determined to defeat him. When Brendan finally returned to his house, he lay awake for a long time, listening to the night sounds and thinking about the strange turn his life had taken. An orc woman was sleeping in his barn. An orc woman had saved his harvest. An orc woman who spoke of right and wrong in terms he understood. The world, he thought, was perhaps more complicated than he had been taught. The next morning, Brendan woke early and went out to check the fields. Water was flowing steadily through the irrigation ditches now, soaking into the thirsty earth. It might be too late for some of the crops, but others would recover. He felt a cautious hope stirring in his chest. He found Kragga already awake, sitting outside the barn and watching the sun rise. She stood when she saw him approaching. "I should leave today," she said. "You have been kind, but I do not want to bring you trouble." Brendan had been thinking about this. "What if you stayed a bit longer?" She tilted her head. "Why?" "Because there is more work to be done. The irrigation system needs proper maintenance. Some of the ditches have collapsed in places. And if the crops start recovering, I will need help with the harvest." He met her gaze. "I can pay you with food and shelter. It is not much, but it is what I have. You want me to work for you. I want to make a bargain with you, fair work for fair compensation." Nothing more complicated than that. Kragga studied him, and he could see her weighing the offer against the risks. Finally, she nodded. "I accept, but the same rules as before. I stay out of sight if anyone comes." "Agreed." They fell into a routine over the following days. Brendan would wake before dawn and check the fields, then meet Kragga by the barn to discuss the day's work. They repaired irrigation ditches together, cleared debris from the water channels, and reinforced weak sections with stones and packed earth. The work was demanding, but having a partner made it bearable. Kragga was strong and tireless, and she had a practical knowledge of farming that surprised him. "My clan grew crops as well as hunted," she explained when he asked. "We were not nomads. We had fields and orchards." "I did not know that orcs farmed. Most humans do not. They only hear stories about raids and battles." She paused in her digging. "But we are not so different. We need to eat and have shelter. We raise children and care for our elders. We laugh and grieve." Brendan absorbed this, feeling his understanding shift. "Then why the raids? Why the violence?" "Because your people pushed into our lands. Because resources are scarce and both sides fight over them. Because once blood is spilled, it is hard to stop the cycle." Kragga's expression was grim. "I am not saying my people are blameless, but neither are yours." It was an uncomfortable truth, but Brendan could not deny it. He had heard tales of human militias attacking orc settlements, of land taken by force and treaties broken. The world was not simple, and neither side held all the virtue or all the blame. As they worked side by side, Brendan found himself growing comfortable with Kragga's presence. She had a quiet sense of humor that emerged in unexpected moments. A wry observation about stubborn tree roots or a comment about the weather that made him laugh. She was careful never to impose, always respectful of the boundaries he had set. But in the fields, they were simply two people working toward a common goal. The crops began to recover. The wheat stalks straightened and took on a healthier color. The vegetable garden burst back to life with impressive speed. By the end of the second week, Brendan dared to believe that he might actually have a harvest worth bringing to market. But comfort bred carelessness. He was in the middle of showing Kragga how to repair a broken plow blade when he heard the sound of horses approaching. His heart seized with panic. He looked at Kragga, who had already heard and was rising to her feet. "The barn," he said urgently. "Go, now." She ran without argument, disappearing into the barn just as three riders came around the bend in the road. Brendan recognized them immediately. His nearest neighbor, Walter Graves, and two of Walter's sons. They were rough men, the kind who solved problems with their fists and asked questions later. "Brendan," Walter called out as he dismounted. "We were passing by and thought we would check on you, see how you are managing." It was not a friendly visit. Walter had made no secret of his desire to buy Brendan's land, had even made offers after his father's death. Brendan had refused, determined to keep the farm in the family. Walter had not taken it well. "I am managing fine," Brendan said, keeping his voice level. "The irrigation is fixed and the crops are recovering." Walter's eyes narrowed. "Is that so? Funny, because we heard you were struggling, heard you might be ready to sell." "You heard wrong." One of Walter's sons was looking around with obvious suspicion. "How did you fix the irrigation?" "Last we knew, you could not find the problem. I found it. A beaver dam upstream. I cleared it." "By yourself?" The disbelief in Walter's voice was clear. "That is a lot of work for one man," Brendan shrugged. "Desperation is a powerful motivator." Walter walked past him, heading toward the fields. Brendan's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to remain calm. Let them look. Let them see that the crops were growing. Maybe then they would leave him alone, but Walter was not looking at the crops. He was looking at the ground. At the footprints in the soft earth near the irrigation ditch. Large footprints, far too big to be Brendan's. "You have help," Walter said flatly. "Who is here?" "No one, those are my prints." "Do not lie to me, boy." Walter's face reddened. "Those are not human footprints." The tension in the air turned dangerous. Brendan's mind raced, searching for an explanation that would satisfy them. But before he could speak, there was a sound from the barn. A soft thump, like something being knocked over. Walter's sons moved immediately toward the barn. Brendan stepped in front of them. "There is nothing in there. Just leave it alone. Get out of the way." The larger son shoved him aside and yanked open the barn door. Kragga stood in the center of the barn, having clearly come down from the loft when she heard the commotion. She faced the three men with her chin raised, her expression defiant despite the fear Brendan could see in her eyes. "An orc," Walter breathed, and his hand went to the sword at his belt. "You are harboring a god's damned orc." "She is a worker," Brendan said quickly, moving between them. "She helped me fix the irrigation, that is all." "That is all?" Walter's voice was incredulous. "Are you insane? Do you know what she is? She is someone who needed help, someone who has done nothing wrong. She is a monster, her kind kills humans." Walter drew his sword. "She needs to be dealt with." Kragga backed up a step but did not run. Brendan saw her calculating, saw her looking for a way out that would not result in violence. But Walter's sons were blocking the door, and there was nowhere to go. "Put the sword away," Brendan said, his voice harder than he had ever heard it. "This is my property. I decide who stays and who goes. You have lost your mind. That thing has bewitched you somehow." The only thing she has done is work. Honest work for honest pay. Brendan held his ground even as his heart hammered in his chest. Now get off my land. Walter's face twisted with anger and disgust. You think you can protect her? You think this will end well for you? He spat on the ground. When the others hear about this, when they find out you are sleeping with orc filth, enough. Brendan's hand found the axe handle leaning against the barn wall. He did not raise it, but the threat was clear. Leave. Now. For a long moment, Walter stared at him. Then he laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Fine. Keep your pet orc, but do not come crying to us when she cuts your throat in the night, and do not expect any help from your neighbors. You are on your own now, Brendan. You have made your choice. Walter and his sons mounted their horses and rode away, leaving dust and tension in their wake. Brendan stood frozen until they were out of sight, then turned to Kragga. Are you hurt? She shook her head. I am sorry. I should have stayed hidden better. This is not your fault. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to calm his racing thoughts. But Walter is right about one thing. The others will find out, and when they do, things will get difficult. Then I should leave. Kragga's voice was steady but resigned. I have brought you enough trouble. Brendan looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the strength in her stance, the intelligence in her eyes, the dignity with which she carried herself despite being threatened. He thought about the past 2 weeks, about working side by side with her, about the easy companionship that had developed between them. And he realized something that should have terrified him but instead felt strangely right. He did not want her to leave. No, he said. You should stay. Brendan, I mean it. You have done nothing wrong. You have helped me save my farm. And if I send you away now because of what Walter thinks, because of fear and prejudice, then I am no better than the people who drove you from your clan. He stepped closer. Stay, please. We will face whatever comes together. Kragga's eyes widened slightly. You would do that. Risk your standing with your neighbors, your safety, for someone like me. Someone like you, Brendan repeated. You mean someone honest and hardworking. Someone who stands by their principles even when it costs them everything. Yes, I would risk a great deal for someone like that. Something shifted in her expression, a softening around the edges. You are either very brave or very foolish. Probably both. He managed a small smile. But my father used to say that the right choice is rarely the easy one. I think he would have wanted me to do this. Kragga was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. Then I will stay, for as long as you will have me. The days that followed were tense. Word spread quickly through the valley about the orcs staying at the Rourke farm. No one came to visit, and when Brendan went into the village to buy supplies, he was met with cold stares and muttered comments. The shopkeeper served him but made it clear he was not welcome to linger. Children who once waved at him now hid behind their mothers' skirts. The isolation stung more than Brendan had anticipated. He had never been particularly social, but knowing that his entire community had turned against him was painful. He began to understand, in a small way, what Kragga must have felt when her own clan cast her out. But if the social rejection was hard, the practical consequences were worse. 2 weeks after Walter's visit, Brendan woke to find that someone had sabotaged his irrigation system during the night. The main channel had been dammed with rocks and debris, diverting the water away from his fields once again. It was clearly deliberate, an act of petty vengeance designed to hurt him. He told Kragga what had happened, and together they spent the day clearing the blockage and repairing the damage. But the message was clear. His neighbors wanted him to fail, wanted to punish him for his choice. This is because of me, Kragga said as they worked. They are trying to drive you out. They are trying to bully me into submission, but I do not respond well to bullying. Brendan's jaw was set in a stubborn line. Let them try. The crops are strong now. We will have a good harvest despite their efforts. And they did. As summer turned to autumn, the fields flourished. The wheat grew tall and golden, the vegetables swelled fat and ripe. It was going to be the best harvest Brendan's farm had seen in years, and he knew it was only possible because of Kragga's help. They worked together from dawn to dusk, cutting wheat and bundling sheaves, pulling vegetables and storing them in the root cellar. The physical labor was exhausting but satisfying. And somewhere in the midst of it all, Brendan realized that his feelings for Kragga had shifted into something beyond friendship or partnership. He noticed the way she smiled when she made a joke, the rare expression lighting up her whole face. He noticed the careful way she handled fragile things, the gentleness that contrasted with her strength. He noticed the sound of her laugh, deep and genuine, and the way it made his chest feel warm. He was falling for her, and the realization terrified him. How could he feel this way about an orc? It went against everything he had been taught, everything his society considered acceptable. And yet he could not deny what he felt, could not pretend that she was anything other than what she had become to him. Essential, important, cherished. He thought Kragga might feel the same way, but he was not certain. She was careful to maintain the boundaries they had established, never presuming on his kindness or asking for more than what they had agreed upon. But sometimes he caught her looking at him with an expression he could not quite read, something soft and vulnerable that vanished the moment she realized he had noticed. The harvest was nearly complete when disaster struck. It happened on a cool evening in late autumn. Brendan was in the barn, organizing tools for the next day's work, when he heard Kragga cry out. He ran outside to find her pointing at the western fields, where orange flames were beginning to lick up the dry stalks of wheat still waiting to be harvested. "Fire!" she shouted. "The fields are on fire." They ran together, grabbing buckets on the way, but by the time they reached the edge of the fire, it was already spreading fast, driven by a steady wind. Brendan's heart sank as he realized that a significant portion of his crop was going to burn. "We need to create a fire break," Kragga said, her voice urgent. "Cut a line through the field so the fire cannot spread further." They worked frantically, using scythes to cut through the wheat and rakes to clear the cut stalks. The heat was intense, the smoke choking. Brendan's eyes watered and his lungs burned, but he kept working. Beside him, Kragga moved with tireless determination, cutting and clearing faster than he could. It took hours, but eventually they managed to create a break wide enough that the fire could not cross. They doused the edges with water from the irrigation ditch, ensuring that no embers could jump the gap. By the time the last of the flames died down, it was well past midnight. They stood together, covered in soot and ash, looking at the blackened ruin of what had been a productive field. Brendan wanted to scream or cry or break something, but he was too exhausted to do any of it. He just stood there, numb with loss. "This was not an accident," Kragga said quietly. "Someone set this deliberately, I know." Brendan's voice was hollow. "Walter or one of his friends. They are determined to destroy me. Then we fight back. We report this to the authorities." "What authorities?" "The village elder is Walter's cousin. The local militia is made up of his friends." Brendan shook his head. "There is no one who will help me, not while you are here." Kragga's face tightened. "Then I will leave, tonight. This has gone too far." "No. Brendan, they are going to keep hurting you. They are going to keep destroying your livelihood until you have nothing left. I cannot let that happen. And I cannot let them win." He turned to face her fully, his hands clenched into fists. "If I send you away now, I am admitting that they are right. That fear and hatred should determine how we live our lives. I will not do that. Even if it costs you everything, even then." He took a deep breath. "Kragga, I need to tell you something. I need to be honest with you. She waited, her amber eyes fixed on his face. "These past months working with you, getting to know you, it has changed me. You have changed me." The words came hard, but he forced them out. "I care about you. More than I should, more than is probably wise. But I cannot deny it anymore. You matter to me. Not as a worker or a partner, but as someone I want in my life. Someone I do not want to lose." Kragga's expression went through a series of changes. Shock, confusion, hope, fear. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "You do not know what you are saying. I do. I know exactly what I am saying. I am an orc. You are human. There is no future in this." "Why not?" "Because other people say so. Because it is not done." Brendan stepped closer. "I have spent the last months defying convention. I have lost the respect of my neighbors and the safety of community, and I would do it all again, gladly, if it meant having you here." Tears were forming in Kragga's eyes, something he had never seen before. "You do not understand. I am clanless. I have no family, no home, no future. I am nothing. You are everything." The words burst out of him with surprising intensity. "You are strong and smart and kind. You have principles you will not compromise. You have worked beside me when you could have walked away. You have saved this farm as much as I have." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. "You are not nothing. Not to me." A sob escaped her throat, and then she was crying in earnest, tears streaming down her green cheeks. Brendan pulled her into an embrace, holding her as she shook. She was taller than him, broader, but in that moment she felt small and fragile in his arms. "I care for you too," she said against his shoulder. "I have tried not to. I have tried to keep my distance, to remember my place. But I cannot help it. When I am with you, I feel like I have found something I did not know I was searching for." They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the darkness, surrounded by the smell of smoke and ash. When they finally pulled apart, Brendan cupped her face in his hands and looked into her eyes. "Then stay. Not as a worker, but as my partner, as someone I want to build a life with. The village will never accept this. Then we will leave the village. We will go somewhere new, somewhere we can start fresh." Even as he said it, Brendan felt the rightness of the decision. There are frontier towns, places where people are too busy surviving to care about old prejudices. We can make a home there. Kragga searched his face, looking for doubt or hesitation. When she found none, she smiled through her tears. "You would leave everything behind for this. For me. Everything here is already poisoned. My neighbors hate me. My farm is being destroyed piece by piece. What am I leaving behind except pain and struggle?" He squeezed her hands. "But with you, I could start something new. Something better." She kissed him then, leaning down to press her lips against his. It was tentative at first, both of them uncertain, but it quickly deepened into something more. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "When do we leave?" Kragga asked. "Soon. But first we finish the harvest. I will not let them take everything from me. We will gather what we can, sell it, and use the coin to start our new life." They worked with renewed purpose over the following week, harvesting every last stalk of wheat that had survived the fire, pulling the remaining vegetables, and preparing everything for market. Brendan knew that going to the market town would be dangerous, that Walter and his friends might try something, but he needed the coin. And more than that, he needed to prove to himself that he would not run away in the night like a thief. The market town was 2 days' travel by wagon. Brendan loaded up his goods while Kragga helped secure the cargo. They set out before dawn, both of them tense but determined. The journey was uneventful until they reached the outskirts of the market town. That was where they found Walter and 6 other men blocking the road. Brendan pulled the wagon to a stop, his hand moving to the knife at his belt. Beside him, Kragga tensed, ready for violence. "Going somewhere? Walter asked, his tone mocking. To market, same as anyone. Brendan kept his voice steady. Now move aside. I do not think so. See, we have been talking, me and the other landowners, and we have decided that we cannot let you profit from your perversion. Cannot let you sell goods grown with orc help, and then use that coin to continue your disgusting lifestyle. What I do on my own land is my business. Not when it affects all of us, not when it brings shame to the whole valley. Walter gestured to the men with him. So here is what is going to happen. You are going to turn that wagon around and go home. You are going to get rid of your orc whore. And then maybe, we will let you back into the community. Rage flooded through Brendan, hot and consuming. She is not a whore, and I am not getting rid of her. Then you are not getting past us. Brendan was calculating his options when Kragga suddenly stood up in the wagon. She jumped down and walked forward to stand between Brendan and the line of men. Her posture was calm, but there was steel in her voice when she spoke. I will make you a deal, she said. Let Brendan pass with his goods. Let him sell his harvest and take his coin, and in exchange I will leave. I will walk away from here and never come back. No, Brendan said immediately. Kragga, no. She ignored him, keeping her eyes on Walter. That is what you want, is it not? For me to be gone, so here is your chance. Let him pass and I disappear. Walter considered this, a slow smile spreading across his face. Just like that. You will give up your comfortable situation and walk back into the wilderness, if it means he can have his life back, yes. Brendan climbed down from the wagon, his heart pounding. Kragga, do not do this. We had a plan. She finally looked at him and her eyes were full of sorrow. Your plan required you to give up everything. I cannot let you do that. You belong here on your father's land. I am the one who does not fit. That is not true. It is, and you know it. She reached out and touched his face, a gesture so tender it made his chest ache. You were kind to me when no one else would have been. You gave me hope when I had none, but I will not let you destroy your life for me. I am not worth that. You are worth everything. His voice broke. Please do not do this. I am sorry, she whispered. Then she turned back to Walter. Do we have an agreement? Walter's smile was triumphant. We do. The moment you are out of sight, we let him pass. Kragga nodded. She walked back to the wagon, gathered the few belongings she had stored there, and slung them over her shoulder. Then she began walking away, heading back toward the wild forest from which she had first emerged months ago. Brendan watched her go, feeling something tear inside his chest. This was wrong. This was all wrong. But the men were watching him, and Kragga was already 50 paces away, and he did not know how to fix this. There, Walter said. Problem solved. You can go to market now, Brendan. Sell your goods, go back to being one of us. But Brendan was not listening. He was thinking about the past months, about everything he and Kragga had built together. He was thinking about standing up to Walter before, about declaring that he would not be bullied or intimidated. He was thinking about the look in Kragga's eyes when she had kissed him, the hope and fear and desperate love, and he realized that she was wrong. He did not belong here without her. This valley, this community, they had become strangers to him. The only place he belonged was wherever she was. He climbed back onto the wagon and snapped the reins. But instead of driving forward through the line of men, he turned the wagon around and drove after Kragga. What are you doing? Walter shouted. She is leaving. You won. You can stay. Brendan did not answer. He drove the wagon up alongside Kragga, who had stopped and was staring at him in confusion. Get on, he said. Brendan, what? Get on the wagon. We are leaving together. But your farm, your harvest, means nothing without you. He extended his hand to her. I told you I wanted to build a life with you. I meant it. Now come on before I have to physically pull you up here. Kragga's face crumpled, but she took his hand and climbed onto the wagon. Behind them, Walter was shouting, cursing them both, but Brendan did not care. He snapped the reins and drove, not toward the market town but away from it, toward the eastern road that led to the frontier settlements. "You are insane," Kragga said, but she was smiling through her tears. "You just gave up everything." "I gave up a piece of land and some narrow-minded neighbors. That is not everything. Everything is sitting right here next to me." He glanced at her. "Besides, we still have the wagon and the goods. We can sell them at the next town. It will be enough to start over." They traveled for 3 days, following the eastern road deeper into frontier territory. The landscape changed gradually, becoming wilder and less settled. They passed through small villages where people barely glanced at them, too focused on their own struggles to care about an interspecies couple. It was strange and liberating at the same time. On the 4th day, they reached a settlement called Timber Ridge. It was a rough place, full of loggers and trappers and people who had come to the frontier to escape their pasts. The market was small but active, and Brendan was able to sell his harvest for a decent price. Not as much as he would have gotten in the larger market town, but enough. With coin in their pockets, they began looking for land. The local land agent was a grizzled older man who barely raised an eyebrow when he saw Kragga. "Looking for a homestead?" he asked. "Yes, something with good soil, near water if possible." The agent pulled out a rough map. "Got a few options. This one here, about 5 miles north, has a stream running through it. Previous owners cleared some land before moving on. It is yours for 20 silver. Brendan looked at Kragga. "What do you think?" "I think we should see it before deciding." They rode out that afternoon to inspect the land. It was smaller than Brendan's previous farm, but the soil looked rich and the stream was clear and steady. There was a small cabin on the property, rough but serviceable. Standing there, looking at the land with Kragga beside him, Brendan felt something he had not felt in a long time: peace. "This could work," he said. "It could," Kragga agreed. "It would be a lot of work starting over. We are good at work." He turned to her. "Are you sure about this? Are you sure you want to stay with me, build this life?" She took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I have never been more sure of anything." They bought the land that day. Over the following weeks, they worked to make the cabin livable and began preparing the cleared land for spring planting. The work was hard, but it felt different from before. This was their land, their future. Every improvement they made was one they chose together. The people of Timber Ridge were tolerant in a way Brendan's old neighbors had never been. A few gave them curious looks, but most simply accepted them as another couple trying to make a life on the frontier. There was an Rourke blacksmith in town, Brendan learned, and several mixed families. Prejudice existed here too, but it was tempered by pragmatism. People who needed each other to survive could not afford to be too picky about their neighbors. Winter came early that year, and Brendan and Kragga spent the cold months holed up in their cabin, making plans for spring. They talked for hours, sharing stories from their pasts, learning the small details that made each other who they were. Brendan learned about Kragga's childhood in the Rourke clan, about her mother who had taught her to farm and her father who had been a warrior. Kragga learned about Brendan's father, about the man who had built a farm from nothing and instilled in his son a fierce independence. They grew closer in those winter months, not just physically but emotionally. The barriers that had once existed between them eroded completely, leaving only trust and affection. When spring finally arrived, they were not just partners but truly in love. The first planting season in their new home was successful. The soil was as rich as it had appeared, and their crops flourished. They grew wheat and vegetables, raised chickens for eggs, and began planning to add a cow or two. Slowly, steadily, they built something stable. On a warm evening in late summer, A year after they had arrived in Timber Ridge, Brendan asked Kragga to take a walk with him. They followed the stream that ran through their property, walking hand in hand, until they reached a spot where the water pooled into a clear pond. "I have been thinking," Brendan said as they sat on the bank, "about the future, about what we are building here." "And," Kragga prompted, "and I realized that I want to make it official. I want everyone to know that we are committed to each other, that this is permanent." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple ring made of twisted copper wire. He had made it himself, spending hours getting the shape just right. "I am not asking you to be my worker or my partner. I am asking you to be my wife." Kragga stared at the ring, her eyes wide. "You want to marry me?" "Yes, if you will have me." "But is that even legal? Can a human and an orc marry? I do not know, and I do not particularly care. Legal or not, I want to stand before whatever authority exists and declare my commitment to you. I want us to build this life together, officially and openly." He took her hand. "So what do you say? Will you marry me?" Tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling. "Yes, yes, of course I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him into a kiss that left them both breathless. When they finally pulled apart, they sat together by the pond, watching the sun set and planning their future. The wedding took place a month later. They were married by the village elder in Timber Ridge, a practical woman who had seen enough of frontier life to know that love took many forms. A few of their neighbors attended, offering quiet congratulations. It was not a grand ceremony, but it was genuine. As Brendan stood beside Kragga, holding her hand and speaking his vows, he thought about how far they had both come. She had been a clanless wanderer, desperate and alone. He had been a struggling farmer, isolated and defensive. Together they had found something neither had expected: home, family, love. The years that followed were good ones. Their farm prospered and they became respected members of the Timber Ridge community. They faced challenges, of course. Illness one winter, a poor harvest another year, the occasional reminder that not everyone approved of their union. But they faced everything together, supporting each other through difficulty and celebrating victories side by side. 5 years after their wedding, Kragga told Brendan she was pregnant. The news filled him with joy and terror in equal measure. He knew nothing about raising children, and even less about raising a half-orc child. But Kragga was calm and confident, assuring him that they would figure it out together. Their daughter was born in early spring, a healthy baby with green-tinted skin and her mother's amber eyes. They named her Ada after Brendan's mother. She was a happy child, strong and curious, and she grew up knowing nothing but love from her parents. As Ada grew, Brendan marveled at how normal their life had become. He had spent so many years thinking that happiness had to look a certain way, fit a certain mold. But watching his daughter play in the fields while his wife worked beside him, he realized that happiness was simply this: people you loved, work that mattered, and a future you wanted to wake up to. One evening, when Ada was 7 years old and playing near the stream, Kragga came to stand beside Brendan on their porch. She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her waist. "You ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Giving up your father's farm, your old life?" Brendan did not have to think about his answer. "Never. That farm was just land. This is home. Because of the place. Because of you. Because of Ada. Because I get to wake up every morning next to someone I love and work land that is truly ours." He kissed her forehead. "You earned my trust 1 row at a time back in those fields. You showed me through action, not words, who you were, and I will never regret choosing you." Kragga smiled, that rare, full smile that still made his heart skip. "I plowed beside you without being asked because I saw someone worth helping, someone good and stubborn and determined. I am glad I stayed." So am I. They stood together, watching their daughter play and the sun sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. In the distance, smoke rose from the chimneys of Timber Ridge, a sign of other families settling in for the evening. Everything was peaceful. Everything was right. Brendan thought about the man he had been years ago, desperate and alone, standing in a dying field and wondering if he should just give up. He thought about the moment Kragga had walked out of the forest and offered help, about the risk they had both taken in trusting each other. And he thought about all the moments since then, the good and the difficult, that had led them to this point. He had learned that love was not about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It was about showing up, day after day, and choosing each other even when it was hard. It was about building something together, row by row, season by season. It was about looking at someone and seeing not what society said they should be, but who they actually were. Kragga had earned his trust by working beside him, by proving through her actions that she was someone worth believing in. And he had earned hers by standing beside her when the world tried to push her away, by choosing her over comfort and convention. Together, they had built not just a farm but a family, not just a house but a home. And as they stood on their porch, watching the day fade into night, Brendan knew that he would not trade this life for anything in the world. Their story was not a fairy tale with magic and destiny. It was something better. It was real. It was earned. And it was theirs. Ada called out to them from near the stream, excited about a frog she had found. Kragga laughed and went down to look, her movements still as strong and sure as they had been all those years ago. Brendan followed, joining his family by the water's edge. As he crouched down to examine the frog with his daughter, feeling Kragga's hand rest on his shoulder, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. For this place, for this family, for the orc woman who had walked out of the forest and changed his life completely. He had been taught that orcs were monsters, that they could not be trusted or loved. But Kragga had taught him something different. She had taught him that anyone willing to work hard, to stand by their principles, to show up day after day with honesty and dedication, could earn trust, could earn love, could become family, and in return he had given her something she thought she had lost forever: belonging, acceptance. A place where she did not have to hide or apologize for who she was. They had saved each other, really. Not through heroics or grand sacrifices, but through the simple act of choosing each other, over and over again, in 1,000 small ways. That night, after Ada was asleep and the house was quiet, Brendan and Kragga sat together on their bed, her head resting on his shoulder. "Tell me about tomorrow," she said, a familiar request. They often ended their days this way, making plans and dreaming small dreams. "Tomorrow we finish repairing the north fence. Then we check the vegetable garden. Ada wants to help with the weeding. She is a good worker, our daughter. She gets that from her mother." Brendan kissed her hair. "And tomorrow evening I thought we might take the wagon into town. There is a harvest festival coming up, and Ada wants to enter her preserves in the competition." "She will win," Kragga said with absolute confidence. "Those preserves are excellent." They talked quietly for a while longer, discussing the mundane details of farm life, and it was perfect in its simplicity. This was the life they had built. These were the moments that mattered. As they finally settled down to sleep, Brendan felt Kragga's hand find his in the darkness, their fingers interlacing in a gesture so familiar it was almost unconscious. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you too," she replied. "Always." And in that moment, in that simple exchange of words they had said 1,000 times before, and would say 1,000 times again, Brendan understood the true measure of their success. Not in the acres they farmed or the coin they earned, but in the absolute certainty that they belonged together. That they had found in each other exactly what they needed. He fell asleep with a smile on his face, already looking forward to tomorrow. To another day of working beside the woman he loved, of raising their daughter, of building the life they had earned together. One row at a time. One day at a time. One choice at a time. It was more than enough. It was everything. The autumn festival in Timber Ridge had become something of a tradition for Brendan's family over the years. Ada, now 7 and full of determined energy, had spent weeks preparing her preserves for the competition. She had insisted on doing most of the work herself, with Kragga supervising and Brendan occasionally sneaking tastes when he thought no one was looking. As they loaded the wagon for the trip into town, Ada chattered excitedly about the other children she would see and the games that would be played. She was comfortable here in a way that filled Brendan with quiet satisfaction. She knew who she was, accepted by a community that saw her simply as the Rourke's daughter rather than defining her by her mixed heritage. The festival was already in full swing when they arrived. Music drifted from the town square, and the smell of roasted meat and fresh bread filled the air. Brendan helped Ada carry her preserves to the judging table, while Kragga went to greet some of the other farm wives she had become friendly with. Watching her laugh and talk with the other women, Brendan felt the same sense of wonder he had experienced on their wedding day. This life they had built felt almost improbable given where they had started, yet here it was, real and solid and good. "Your wife is entering the weaving competition this year," one of the men said, coming to stand beside Brendan. It was Marcus Fenn, a fellow farmer who had been among the first to welcome them to Timber Ridge. "I heard she is quite skilled." "She is," Brendan agreed, "though she will insist it is nothing special. That is the way with the best craftspeople, they never boast." Marcus watched the crowd for a moment. "You know, when you two first arrived, I admit I had my doubts, but you have become good neighbors. You work hard, you help when others need it, and you have raised a fine daughter." The casual acceptance in Marcus's words meant more than the man probably realized. "Thank you. That means a great deal." The day passed in a pleasant blur of competition, conversation, and celebration. Ada's preserves won third place, which delighted her beyond reason. Kragga's woven blanket took first place, though she blushed and insisted the other entries had been just as good. Brendan found himself drawn into discussions about crop rotation and irrigation techniques with several other farmers, the kind of practical talk that he had always enjoyed. As evening fell and lanterns were lit around the square, music struck up for dancing. Brendan found Kragga and extended his hand with mock formality. "May I have this dance, wife?" She laughed but took his hand. "You may, husband." They joined the other couples in the square, moving through the simple folk dance that everyone knew. Brendan was not a graceful dancer, and Kragga's height sometimes made the movements awkward, but they managed well enough. What mattered was being together, being part of this community celebration, being able to hold each other openly without fear or judgment. As the dance ended and another began, Ada ran up to them with another child in tow, a boy about her age. "Papa, Mama, this is Thomas. His family just moved here. Can he come visit our farm sometime?" Brendan smiled at the boy, who looked shy but friendly. "Of course. You are welcome anytime." The boy's parents approached, introducing themselves as the Harpers, new homesteaders looking to start a sheep farm. Brendan and Kragga welcomed them warmly, offering advice about the region and promising to help however they could. This, too, had become part of their life, helping newcomers the way others had once helped them. The evening wore on, and eventually Ada began to yawn, her earlier excitement giving way to exhaustion. They loaded back into the wagon, Ada curled up in the back surrounded by blankets and began the ride home under a sky full of stars. "Days like this make me grateful," Kragga said quietly, not wanting to wake their daughter. "When I was wandering alone before I found your farm, I never imagined I could have this." "Neither did I," Brendan admitted. "I thought I would spend my life alone, struggling to maintain my father's legacy. I never imagined finding a partner, let alone a family. Strange how life turns out. Strange, but good." He glanced at her profile in the moonlight. "I am glad you walked out of that forest. I am glad you stayed. I am glad you let me." She leaned against him, careful not to disrupt his control of the reins. "I am glad you fought for us when it would have been easier to give in." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the steady rhythm of the horse's hooves and the creaking of the wagon wheels the only sounds. The land around them was familiar now, every hill and tree a known landmark on the way home. When they finally reached their farm, Brendan carried Ada inside and put her to bed while Kragga tended to the horse. They moved through their evening routine with the ease of long practice, each knowing their role without needing to discuss it. Later, standing on their porch and looking out at the moonlit fields, Brendan felt a profound sense of completeness. This farm, these fields, this family, they were what he had been meant to find. All the struggle and sacrifice that had brought them here suddenly seemed not just worthwhile but necessary. Each hardship had been a step on the path to this moment. "What are you thinking about?" Kragga asked, coming to stand beside him. "Everything. Nothing. How lucky I am." He turned to her. "How much I love you," she smiled, that beautiful smile that still made his heart skip. "I love you too, more than I can ever properly say." "Then do not say it, just stay. Keep building this life with me." "Always," she promised, and she meant it. They both did. The life they had built was not perfect. There were still challenges and difficulties, still moments of doubt and worry. But it was theirs, earned through hard work and stubborn determination and a willingness to choose each other every single day. As they stood together under the stars, Brendan thought about how far they had come from that first day when Kragga had walked out of the forest and offered to help a struggling farmer she did not know. He thought about every row they had plowed together, every fence they had mended, every meal they had shared. All of it had led to this, to a family and a home and a love that could weather any storm. The Orc woman had earned his trust one row at a time, proving through action and dedication that she was someone worth believing in. And in return, he had given her a place to belong, a family to cherish, and a love that asked nothing of her except that she be herself. It was more than either of them had dared to hope for. It was more than enough. It was everything they needed. And as they turned to go inside, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring, they did so together, hand in hand, secure in the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious. They had found home in each other. The seasons continued to turn, and life on the farm followed its steady rhythm. Ada grew taller and stronger, taking on more responsibilities, and showing an aptitude for farming that pleased both her parents. She had inherited her mother's strength and her father's stubbornness, a combination that served her well. 2 years after the autumn festival, on a crisp spring morning, Brendan woke to find Kragga already up and standing by the window, looking out at the dawn. "Is something wrong?" he asked, sitting up. "No, just thinking." She turned to him, and there was something soft in her expression. "Do you remember the day we met, when I walked out of the forest and saw your dying fields? Of course, how could I forget? I was so desperate that day, so lost. I had convinced myself that I would never have a home again, that I would wander until I died somewhere in the wilderness." She came back to the bed and sat beside him. "I saw your fields and thought that maybe, if I could help you, you might give me a few meals and a place to sleep for a night or two. That was all I hoped for." Brendan took her hand. "And instead you got a husband and a farm and a troublesome daughter," she laughed. "The best possible outcome." Her expression grew more serious. "But I want you to know that I understand what you sacrificed for me. Your old farm, your community, the life you had planned. I know what it cost you. It cost me nothing that mattered, and it gained me everything that does." He squeezed her hand. "I made my choice, Kragga. Not because I was noble or brave, but because a life without you in it was not worth living. It was the easiest decision I ever made. I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for it. And I will spend the rest of mine being grateful that you walked out of that forest and into my life." He pulled her close. "We saved each other. That is the truth of it. You saved my farm and I saved your hope. And together we built something better than either of us could have alone." They held each other as the sun rose, painting their bedroom in shades of gold. Outside, they could hear Ada moving around, already starting her morning chores without being asked. The farm was waking up, ready for another day of work and life. And that was how it went. Days became weeks, weeks became months, months became years. They worked hard, they loved deeply, and they built a legacy that had nothing to do with bloodlines or tradition and everything to do with choice and commitment. When Ada eventually grew into a young woman, strong and confident and proud of her heritage, she would sometimes ask her parents about how they met. And Brendan would tell her the story, about a desperate Rourke woman and a failing farmer, about trust earned one row at a time, about choosing love over fear. And Ada would understand, in a way that only someone who had grown up surrounded by that love could, that the best things in life were not given but earned. That family was not defined by blood but by commitment. That home was wherever you found people who saw you for who you truly were and loved you anyway. The farm prospered over the years, and Brendan and Kragga became elders in the Timber Ridge community. They helped other newcomers, other outcasts, other people looking for a place to belong. Their home became known as a place of welcome, where differences were celebrated rather than feared. And through it all, through every season and every year, Brendan and Kragga remained devoted to each other. Their love had been tested by hardship and proven by time. It was not a fairy tale romance, but something deeper and more real, built on respect and trust and the daily choice to honor the commitment they had made. On their 20th wedding anniversary, as they sat together on their porch watching the sunset, Ada, now grown and married herself, expecting her first child, Brendan thought about everything they had been through. "We did well," he said quietly. "We did," Kragga agreed. "Better than I ever imagined possible." "Do you have any regrets?" She was quiet for a moment, considering. Then she shook her head. "Not a single one. Every choice, every sacrifice, every difficult moment, it all led to this. To you, to our family, to this life. I would not change any of it." "Neither would I." He took her hand, noting the way their fingers fit together as perfectly as they had that first day. "Thank you for walking out of that forest. Thank you for plowing beside me without being asked. Thank you for staying. Thank you for letting me. Thank you for choosing me when it would have been easier to send me away. Thank you for loving me." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for giving me a home." They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars appeared. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life that society said was impossible, who had proven that love could bridge any divide if both people were willing to work for it. The Rourke woman had earned his trust one row at a time, and together they had cultivated not just crops but a family, not just land but a legacy. And that legacy was simple but profound. That kindness matters, that trust must be earned, That love is worth fighting for, and that home is not a place, but the people who choose to stand beside you no matter what comes. As darkness fell and they rose to go inside, Brendan took one last look at their fields, at the land they had worked together for so many years. Tomorrow they would wake and work again, side by side as they always had. And the day after that, and the day after that, for as long as they both lived. It was a good life. A hard life sometimes, but a good one. And it was theirs, earned through sweat and determination, and a love that had grown from those first tentative moments of trust into something unshakable. The orc woman and the human farmer had found something rare and precious. They had found each other, and that, in the end, was all that mattered. Their story was complete, a testament to the power of trust earned, work shared, and love freely given. From that first day when Kragga had emerged from the forest and offered help to a struggling farmer, to this moment decades later when they could look back on a life well lived, every step had been worth it. They had faced prejudice and overcome it. They had faced hardship and endured it. They had faced the unknown and built something beautiful within it. And they had done it all together, one row at a time, one day at a time, one choice at a time. It was a happily ever after earned through action rather than granted by fate, and that made it all the more precious. As they closed the door to their home that night, ready to rest before another day of shared labor and shared life, they did so with hearts full of gratitude and love. The orc woman had earned the farmer's trust. The farmer had earned the orc woman's love. And together, they had earned something far greater, a lifetime of belonging, of partnership, of home. Their story had reached its end, but their life together would continue, each day adding new memories to the foundation they had built. And when they were old and gray, when their time finally came to rest, they would do so knowing that they had lived fully, loved deeply, and created something beautiful out of what the world had told them was impossible. The fields would remain, worked now by their daughter and her family. The farm would endure, a testament to what two people could build when they chose to trust each other. And the memory of their love would live on, a quiet reminder that the best things in life are those we earn through dedication, perseverance, and an unwavering commitment to choosing each other every single day. That was their legacy. That was their triumph. That was their happily ever after. And it was enough.